the directions are going to say, find the value of x that makes it a parallelogram, okay? Or find the angle that makes it a parallelogram. You're essentially doing exactly the same thing. Opposite sides are congruent, opposite sides are parallel, opposite angles are congruent, consecutive angles are supplementary. It's just the converse of each of these. Push it just a little bit and leave it alone. Push it down just a little bit, it's not moving. All right, so here we go. If both pairs of opposite sides of a quadrilateral are congruent and parallel, and I'm just going to use that symbol for parallel because my blank is not big enough to write both. Okay. If both pairs of opposite sides of a quadrilateral are congruent and parallel, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. So basically it's saying everything we've said before, it's just reversed. So instead of saying if it's a parallelogram, then this happens, we're now saying if this happens, then it's a parallelogram. It's the converse of where we started. The next one says if both pairs of opposite angles of a quadrilateral, what are opposite angles in a quadrilateral? They're supposed to be, opposite angles are congruent. So if both pairs of opposite angles of a quadrilateral are congruent, then that quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Well, this whole chapter's got them. The next one talks about the diagonals. What do we know that the diagonals of a parallelogram do? Bisect each other. So if the diagonals of a quadrilateral bisect each other, then that quadrilateral is a parallelogram. And then there's one other way that we can determine if a quadrilateral is a parallelogram. And if that is one pair of opposite sides is both congruent and parallel, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Okay, so the way that would look if I were drawing it and marking it, and I were to ask you if it's a parallelogram, it would be one pair of sides are both congruent and parallel. So you would have the congruency marks and the parallel marks. Okay. Is everybody good? I'm holding. Actually, this first one I forgot. It's just supposed to be congruent, not parallel. My bad. Change that first one to just congruent. I can't spell. There we go. Sorry about that. I wasn't thinking. So if we have both pairs of opposite sides marked congruent, then we can determine that that quadrilateral is a parallelogram. So look at that first example. It says, determine whether the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. We're looking at our picture. This is what I'm looking for. Do I have both pairs of opposite sides congruent? Do I have both pairs of opposite angles congruent? Do I have the diagonals bisected? Or do I have one pair that is both congruent and parallel? Do I have one of those four in this picture? Which one do I have? The opposite sides are congruent. So yes, this is a parallelogram. And the reason is that opposite sides are congruent. Okay. Because they showed me that both pairs of opposite sides were the same. Top and bottom are 12, side and side are 5. Yes, that is a parallelogram because it fits that first theorem saying that if opposite sides are congruent, then it is a parallelogram. Is everybody kind of okay? All right, so then it just says if it's a parallelogram, find each measure. I want you to try that one, please. This is nothing different than we've been doing the past 2 days. Fill in your picture. Label everything in your picture. Label the sides that you can figure out. Label the angles you can figure out. And then go back and answer your questions. Okay, so label your picture first with everything we know. Remember, opposite sides are congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. Consecutive angles are what? Starts with S. Supplementary, yeah. And then the diagonals bisect each other, but there are no diagonals in this picture, so we don't really have to worry about that part. Kingston. Language.
Sorry.
You send that in front of your parents?
No.
Pretend like I'm your mother. You would not say that in front of me.
Get y'all deep right now.
I'm probably older than your mama, so just treat it like that, okay? I'm 48 years old, I don't say that in front of mama.
Oh God.
Come back, come.
And then there's your side. And this is inside, that's an angle. So MN is going to be the same as whatever's across from it.
Yeah, I'm bugging. Yeah. Oh, the L would be what I just had. Oh, this job really so easy.
All right, let's label our picture.
Hold on, let me finish.
Okay. LK is 31, correct?
Yeah.
Where else is going to be 31?
Okay.
I'm not answering my questions yet. I'm just labeling my picture. LM, that side is 45, so it's going to be 45 across from that. Okay, now let's look at our angles. Opposite of each other are the same. What is opposite of angle N? L. So L is also 119. Okay. And then I can either choose to find M first or K first. It really doesn't matter. But I know that N is going to be supplementary to either one. So how would I figure out what those are? Subtract 180 and 119. And so what are each one of those going to be? 61. Okay. So now let's answer our questions. What did we label MN as? KN. Angle K.
61.
Angle L.
19.
And angle M.
51.
Okay. Exactly the same stuff we've been doing. It's just the way they word it is the converse. Nothing has changed. We're still using our properties. All right. Try 2. This one doesn't have angle measures. It has sides and it has diagonals. Remember, opposite sides are congruent. That part has not changed. The diagonals do what to each other?
Hey, Bridget, come here real quick.
Answer the question. What do the diagonals do? Bisect each other. So if you know one part of a diagonal, you know its matching part because it's going to be the same. You also have some information below your picture that you're going to use.
Oh, that whole thing. Okay.
Okay, so the whole thing is 22. Can you figure out what each piece is?
No.
Oh, so this would be 10.
So I mean, I'm talking
15, 15, correct? This. How are we supposed to know? Right. How are you supposed to know what?
Okay. So they're cut in half, right?
Yeah.
So
It gotta be him.
there you go.
And then Miss Bridges. And then for their side, it's the same thing.
Okay, but it's asking for the whole one this time.
So that could be.
So Miss Bridges.
What is this piece? What is that piece going to do? So what will the whole thing be?
Does that mean when you figure out both sides, that means they both gonna be 11? Because they both equals 220. don't know how to get them.
Okay, so what is this one?
Seven.
So that means this one is also.
Seven.
And then we can find the whole thing.
And
Then you should take away headphones.
I'm gonna label my picture. CD is at the top, so the bottom is also the same. DE is on the right, so CF is also the same. All right, let's look at this. What is CG labeled as? I just colored it in red. What is that labeled as? 7. So what would the bottom part also be? 7, okay.
the whole thing 14.
So the whole thing would be 14, yes. So I'm going to go ahead and put that there. FD is my other diagonal. It tells me at the bottom of this picture that that whole thing is 22. So what would each piece be? What is each piece going to be then if it's cut in half?
11.
Okay. CF is 10. FE is 15. And GD is 11. All right, do E, 3. Jeez. We did one of these yesterday. I want you to find the length of KL, but that means you're going to have to find X.
Oh, see, this is where you're trying to mess me up. Come on here, Ms. Bridges. I got a question. I got a question, Ms. Bridges. So we set it up like this, right?
So you got to show me what you're talking about before I can answer yes or no.
Right? Boom. You gotta go for X first. Like that? Oh, put them in one line.
It's not doing nothing.
I have KL labeled and I have JM labeled. Are those opposite sides?
No.
Which means they are congruent to each other. So to solve for X, I'm going to set up an equation and set those equal. I like to take my smaller x to my larger, so I'm going to subtract my 7x over to that 12. What kind of 2 is that I need to bring down, though? Negative, okay. 12x minus 7x is 5x. Then how am I going to move that 22 over? Add it. So that's going to give me 20 equals 5x. So what is it that x is going to be?
4.
Is that what they asked me for?
No.
No. All right, KL, we got to plug that in. KL is at the top here. So I'm going to go 7 times 4 minus 2. 7 times 4 is 28, and 28 minus 2 is 26. There we go.
So we like that on the test?
Yeah, that's a very basic, straightforward question.
That's an easy one.
That's easy.
All right, next one. I want you to solve for x. Okay, let me ask you a question first. Are these things that are labeled the 3x plus 5 and the 9x minus 17, are those sides or angles?
Angles.
Okay, so when it's angles, here's what you have to determine. Are they opposite from each other so that we set them equal? Or are they next to each other so that we add them and set them equal to 180?
So you're saying 10, they're the same?
Yes.
And then Q and H are the same? Just solve it and
Well, you don't have those. You have the Q and T, so those aren't the same.
right.
So we're going to have to add the two together, yep. So Q and T, those are my consecutive angles. They are next to each other. That means they add together to equal 180. We do not set them equal to each other. They are not opposite. They are consecutive. So when we set up our equation, we're going to take both of them, 3x plus 5 plus 9x minus 7. There you go. And finish solving that for x. I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to do that. You don't have to plug this one back in. It just asks me for x. They're on the same side. So remember yesterday we had them where we just combined them because they were on the same side of the equal sign? You notice how the 3x and the 9x are both on the left of equal?
Yeah.
So we just put them together as they are.
What do I do first? Just
Combine the left. Remember, when you're solving your equation, because this 3x and this 9x are on the same side, we're just going to add them together. What is 3 plus 9?
12.
Okay. And then I'm going to add my positive 5 and my negative 17 because they're on the same side. What's positive 5 and negative 17 going to give me? Okay.
Oh, no.
All right. We're going to solve for x. We're going to add this 12 over. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 12. And what does that give me? There you go. So x equals 16. All right, one more question. It says find the values of x and y so that this top of that parallelogram is an eraser. I want you to solve for x and y. I blew it up bigger in case you can't see it in your picture. Let me ask you this before we get started. The 56 and the 7x, are those angles or sides? Angles. What about the 5y minus 26 and the 4y plus 4? Are those also angles? Yes. And so what we know then is we know that angles that are opposite of each other are congruent. So that's what we can use here. You could also use the supplementary, but the congruent is easier. So set your angles that are opposite each other, equal to each other, and solve for x, and then solve for y. You don't have to plug it in, it just wants x and y.
So by itself,
Yeah, so you get those two, that gives you x, and then you do the same thing here, set those two equal.
and then, okay.
Equals, because they're opposite each other, they're equal to each other. So we put them next to each other. We put it across and they're equal, so those two are equal. And then those two are equal, and we have two separate equations. Yeah. I mean, you can do that, but that's the harder way to do it. If you're looking at your angles across each other, set up your equation. And then just solve for x. All right, look at my picture. Which angle is directly across from 56? 7x. So I'm going to take these two and set them equal to each other. 56 equals 7x. How do I solve for x there? And what is 56 divided by 7? So there's x.
That easy? Hey,
What about these other two angles? What are they? They're opposite each other as well, so that means they are also congruent. So I'm going to set 5y minus 26 equal to 4y plus 4. Your equation could be backwards than mine. It doesn't matter as long as you get the same thing for y. I'm subtracting my 4y over. And then I'm going to add my 26. And what did you guys get for y?
Oh, wait, no, my bad.
30. Okay, because the angles are across from each other, they are equal. You could have used the supplementary, but to me that's harder. So if I can set things equal to each other, I'm going to do that all day rather than adding and setting it equal to 180.